I knew something was wrong when my son Mark looked at me with pity in his eyes and spoke to me like I was a child. "Dad, don't you remember? We talked about this yesterday. Ashley already explained everything to you. But we hadn't talked about it yesterday. And his wife Ashley hadn't explained anything to me. I was being gaslighted into believing I had Alzheimer's disease by my own daughter-in-law, a calculated campaign to convince everyone, including my own son, that I was losing my mind. For 18 months, Ashley orchestrated an elaborate scheme, moving my belongings, editing recordings of our conversations, even doctor shopping until she found someone willing to diagnose me with early-stage dementia, all to gain control of my $2.8 million estate and the family business I had built over 45 years. I was only 69 years old and in excellent health, but I almost began to doubt my own sanity until I discovered the truth. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Richard Thompson, though everyone calls me Rich. I built Thompson Manufacturing from the ground up after returning from Vietnam in 1975. I served as a combat engineer in the Army's 1st Infantry Division for 2 tours, and those years taught me discipline, resilience, and problem-solving skills that would later prove invaluable in business. When I came home to Cleveland, the manufacturing sector was struggling, but I saw opportunity where others saw decline. Starting with a single lathe in my garage and a loan from my father-in-law, I began making precision components for local industrial machinery companies. My first major contract came 6 months later when Jensen Industrial, a mid-sized equipment manufacturer, needed custom parts they couldn't source elsewhere due to unusual specifications. I worked 20-hour days to fulfill that order, sleeping on a cot beside the lathe. That contract led to others, and within 3 years, I had moved operations to a small warehouse and hired my first 4 employees. By 1980, Thompson Manufacturing occupied a 15,000 square foot facility with 23 employees. We specialized in high-precision, low-volume components that larger manufacturers found unprofitable. Our reputation for quality and reliability spread through the Midwest manufacturing community, and by the mid-1980s, we had expanded into automotive and aerospace components. Throughout this growth, my wife Elizabeth was my partner in every sense. While I handled production and business development, she managed our finances and administration. Elizabeth had been my high school sweetheart. We married in 1972, just before my second deployment to Vietnam. She was brilliant with numbers and people management, qualities that proved essential as our company grew. By the time I began considering retirement in my mid-60s, Thompson Manufacturing employed 57 people, generated annual revenues of over $5 million, and had expanded to a 40,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility. Our precision components were used in everything from luxury vehicles to commercial aircraft to medical devices. More importantly, we had built a company culture based on quality, integrity, and taking care of our people. Many employees had been with us for decades, and we had funded college educations for several of their children through our scholarship program. Elizabeth and I raised 2 children, our son Mark, now 43, and our daughter Sarah, 41. Mark had always shown interest in the family business, trailing after me in the shop from the time he could walk. He absorbed everything like a sponge, asking insightful questions about the machinery and processes even as a child. It seemed natural when he chose to major in mechanical engineering at Ohio State, graduating with honors before joining the company straight out of college. He worked his way through various departments, starting on the shop floor despite his degree, learning every aspect of the operation. By the time he was 35, he was serving as Chief Operations Officer while I remained CEO. Our plan was for him to gradually take over as I stepped back, with a full transition of ownership planned for my 70th birthday. Mark married Ashley Carter when he was 38. They had met at a manufacturing industry conference where she was representing a pharmaceutical company that supplied safety equipment. Ashley was attractive and charismatic, 15 years younger than Mark, with an MBA from Cornell and a background in pharmaceutical sales. After a whirlwind courtship of just 6 months, they were married in an elaborate ceremony that seemed excessive to Elizabeth and me, though we kept our opinions to ourselves. A year later, Ashley gave birth to twins, Emma and Ethan, and decided to become a stay-at-home mother. Our daughter Sarah had chosen a different path, showing an aptitude for science and medicine from an early age. She graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School and became a pediatric neurologist, specializing in childhood developmental disorders. Sarah married Paul Chen, a software engineer, and they settled in Seattle where she joined a prestigious children's hospital. They had 2 children, Abigail, now 14, and Daniel, 10, both academically gifted like their parents. Though she lived farther away, we maintained a close relationship, with regular video calls and visits several times a year. Elizabeth passed away from breast cancer in 2018 after 46 years of marriage. Her diagnosis had come like a thunderbolt 3 years earlier, stage 2 at discovery, but with an aggressive form that proved resistant to treatment. We explored every option, from standard protocols to experimental treatments, but the cancer eventually spread to her liver and bones. She faced her illness with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout our life together, more concerned about my well-being than her own, even in her final days. Her last coherent words to me were, "Take care of yourself, Rich. Promise me you won't work too hard." Her loss was devastating. For months, I moved through life in a fog of grief, going through the motions at work and at home. What pulled me back was the realization that Elizabeth would have wanted me to continue living fully, to remain engaged with our family, our business, and our community. I found purpose in continuing to run the company, mentoring younger employees, and especially spending time with my 4 grandchildren, Mark and Ashley's twins, Emma and Ethan 12, and Sarah and Paul's children, Abigail 14 and Daniel 10. After Elizabeth's death, I remained in our family home, a 4-bedroom colonial in Shaker Heights that we had purchased 30 years earlier. It was perhaps too large for just me, but it held memories in every room, and I couldn't bear the thought of leaving. Besides, it was perfect for when the grandchildren visited, with plenty of space for everyone. I was active and independent, enjoying golf twice weekly with my friends Jack Peterson and Henry Washington, serving on the boards of 2 local charities, and still working 3 days a week at Thompson Manufacturing. I had a long-standing poker night every Thursday with friends I'd known for decades. Retired Judge Robert Sims, my attorney Harold Winters, former Cleveland Browns quarterback Thomas Miller, and my next-door neighbor Dr. James Wilson, a retired cardiologist. These friends had been my support system after Elizabeth's death, checking in regularly and making sure I remained connected to the community. My health was excellent for my age. I took medication for mild hypertension, but was otherwise fit and sharp-minded. Dr. Frank Martin had been my physician for over 20 years and gave me a clean bill of health at my annual physical just 3 months before the trouble began. "Whatever you're doing, Rich, keep it up," he had said. "Your numbers are better than patients half your age." The trouble began subtly, about 2 years after Elizabeth's passing. Mark had married Ashley 5 years earlier. Initially, our relationship had been cordial if not particularly close. Elizabeth had privately expressed reservations about Ashley, finding her somewhat calculating and status-conscious, but had made every effort to welcome her into the family. After Elizabeth died, however, Ashley began showing increased interest in my welfare, calling more frequently and stopping by the house unannounced to check on me. At first, I appreciated her concern, interpreting it as kindness toward her widowed father-in-law. I didn't recognize it as the beginning of a calculated campaign. There had been early warning signs I missed. About 6 months after Elizabeth's funeral, Ashley had approached me about updating my will. "It's important to have everything in order, Rich," she had said with seemingly genuine concern. "Especially now that Elizabeth isn't here to handle these matters." I assured her that my estate planning was current, having been updated during Elizabeth's illness. She pressed for details about my arrangements, asking specifically about the business succession plan and whether the house would go to Mark. When I changed the subject, she dropped it temporarily but brought it up again several times in the following weeks. Another red flag came when Ashley suggested selling the family home. "This place is too big for you now, Rich," she said during one visit, "and the maintenance must be overwhelming. There's a lovely retirement community near us where you'd have people your own age around." When I firmly stated my intention to stay in my home, she smiled tightly and didn't mention it again, at least not directly. Instead, she began highlighting every minor household issue as evidence that the house was becoming too much for me. The first incident I can clearly identify as part of her coordinated scheme occurred during a Sunday dinner at their home. I was helping clear the table when Ashley touched my arm with a concerned expression. "Rich, that's the third time you've asked if I want you to clear the table. Are you feeling okay?" I was confused. "I only asked once," I said with certainty. "No, Dad," Mark interjected, frowning slightly. "You did ask multiple times, I noticed too." I had no recollection of asking more than once, but both of them seemed so convinced that I began to doubt myself. "Maybe I'm just tired," I conceded. Ashley gave Mark a meaningful look. "It's been happening more frequently," she said quietly, as though I wasn't standing right there. "Remember last week when he couldn't find his glasses even though they were in his shirt pocket?" This was news to me. I had no memory of such an incident, but Mark nodded solemnly. Looking back, I realize Ashley had likely invented the entire episode, priming Mark to notice symptoms that weren't there. After that dinner, similar incidents began occurring with increasing frequency, always with Ashley as the primary witness. I would allegedly repeat questions I had no memory of asking. Items in my house would mysteriously be misplaced, only for Ashley to find them in unlikely locations. My car keys in the refrigerator, my reading glasses in the flour canister. Each time, she would express growing concern about my mental state, always within Mark's hearing. I began to notice that these incidents almost never occurred when I was alone with Mark or with others present, only when Ashley was there to observe them. My longtime housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, who had worked for us for 22 years, seemed confused by Ashley's claims. "Mr. Thompson," she said privately one day, "Mrs. Ashley told Mr. Mark that you put the mail in the washing machine yesterday. But I was here all day and you didn't do that. Is something happening?" This was the first external confirmation that something strange was occurring, but I brushed it off, not wanting to create family tension by suggesting Ashley was lying. About 3 months into this pattern, Ashley suggested I see a doctor just to be safe. When I resisted, insisting I felt completely fine, she enlisted Mark's help to persuade me. "Dad, we're worried about you," he said during a private conversation at the office. "Mom had early onset dementia in her family. It wouldn't hurt to get checked out." This wasn't true. Elizabeth's family had no history of dementia, but when I pointed this out, Mark looked confused. "That's not what Mom told Ashley," he said. "Apparently they discussed it several times before Mom passed." I couldn't prove otherwise, as Elizabeth was gone and couldn't confirm or deny these alleged conversations. Later, I would discover in Elizabeth's private journals that she had specifically noted her family's unusual longevity and cognitive health into old age. Her own father had remained sharp as a tack until his death at 94. But at the time, I had no way to counter this fabricated family history. To appease my son and daughter-in-law, I agreed to see my regular physician, Dr. Martin. After a thorough examination and cognitive assessment, Dr. Martin found nothing concerning. "Your memory and cognitive functions are excellent for a man of any age, let alone 69, he assured me. "I see no indication of dementia or significant cognitive decline." This should have been the end of the matter, but Ashley was dissatisfied with Dr. Martin's assessment. "He's not a specialist," she told Mark within my hearing. "We should consult a neurologist who specializes in geriatric cognition." What I didn't know then was that Ashley had approached Dr. Martin privately before my appointment, detailing numerous concerning behaviors I had allegedly exhibited. Dr. Martin later told me he had been suspicious of her eagerness to help with my diagnosis, which was partly why he had conducted such a thorough examination. Over the next 2 months, Ashley arranged appointments with 3 different neurologists. The first 2 found no evidence of cognitive impairment, but the third, Dr. Kaplan, was more amenable to Ashley's suggestions. I later discovered that Ashley had specifically sought out Dr. Kaplan after learning he had been reprimanded previously by the medical board for overdiagnosing dementia and prescribing unnecessary medications, information she had access to through her pharmaceutical industry contacts. During my appointment with Dr. Kaplan, Ashley accompanied me and repeatedly interrupted to remind me of incidents I had no recollection of: missed appointments, confused conversations, disorientation while driving. When I disputed these claims, she gave Dr. Kaplan a knowing look, as if my denial was further evidence of impairment. To my shock, Dr. Kaplan's report indicated early signs consistent with mild cognitive impairment, possibly indicative of early-stage Alzheimer's disease. He recommended further testing and beginning medication to potentially slow progression. I was stunned and insisted on a second opinion, but Mark and Ashley now had a medical opinion supporting their concerns. One person who became increasingly uncomfortable with the situation was my grandson Ethan. Though only 12, he was observant and sensitive. One afternoon when Ashley had brought the twins to visit, Ethan pulled me aside while his mother was on the phone in another room. "Grandpa," he whispered, "Mom tells us we need to be patient with you because you're confused a lot, but you never seem confused to me. And yesterday I heard her telling Dad that you put dish soap in the coffee maker, but you were with me in the workshop the whole morning fixing my science project." This conversation was another piece of evidence that something was seriously wrong, but I was still struggling to make sense of it. Why would Ashley, who had always seemed ambitious but rational, fabricate cognitive decline? Things escalated quickly after Dr. Kaplan's provisional diagnosis. Ashley began accompanying me to all appointments, speaking to doctors before I entered the room. She started managing my medication, insisting on filling a weekly pill organizer for me, something I had never needed. I later discovered she was adding sedatives to my evening medication, making me groggy and disoriented the next morning, reinforcing the appearance of confusion. The sedatives came from her own previous prescription for anxiety, which she had deliberately stockpiled. Mark began taking over more responsibilities at the company, often excluding me from important meetings and decisions under the guise of reducing my stress. Several longtime employees noticed the change and expressed concerns privately. Victor Martinez, our head of engineering who had been with the company for 27 years, came to my office one afternoon. "Rich," he said hesitantly, "is everything okay?" Mark has been telling people you're stepping back for health reasons, but you seem fine to me. And there are rumors that Ashley has been meeting with potential buyers for the company. This was the first I'd heard about any potential sale, and it sent alarm bells ringing. I began paying closer attention to activity at the company, noting that Ashley had started appearing at the office more frequently, often closeted in meetings with Mark and people I didn't recognize. When I inquired, Mark explained they were financial advisors helping with long-term planning. The most alarming development came when Mark approached me about granting him power of attorney. "It's just a precaution, Dad," he explained gently. "Ashley and I want to make sure your affairs are in order while you can still make these decisions yourself." The document he presented was comprehensive, giving him complete control over my financial, medical, and personal decisions. When I hesitated to sign, Ashley suggested we compromise by having the power of attorney take effect only if 2 doctors certified my incapacity. This seemed reasonable until I noticed the fine print. The doctors could be selected by Mark, and one was already specified as Dr. Kaplan. I told them I needed time to review the document with my attorney, Harold. Their reaction was telling. Ashley immediately became agitated, suggesting that my desire to consult an attorney was itself evidence of paranoia. Mark seemed torn but ultimately sided with his wife, asking why I didn't trust them to act in my best interest. Around this time, my poker buddies began noticing changes, not in my cognitive function, but in my mood and social engagement. I had started declining their invitations, partly because I was unsure of my own mind, and partly because Ashley had begun scheduling family commitments that conflicted with my regular social activities. Robert Sims, the retired judge, finally showed up unannounced at my house one evening. "Rich, we're worried about you," he said bluntly. "You haven't been to poker in a month, you missed the charity golf tournament you've played in for 20 years, and Henry says you've turned down 3 fishing trips. This isn't like you." I found myself confiding some of my concerns to Robert, whose legal mind immediately picked up on the troubling patterns. "This sounds like a classic case of undue influence," he said. "I've seen it hundreds of times on the bench, usually with second spouses or caregivers, but sometimes with adult children or their spouses. Let me connect you with a specialist in elder law." Robert's concern reinforced my growing suspicion that I was being manipulated, but I still couldn't fully accept that Ashley, and by extension my own son, would deliberately orchestrate such a scheme. That night, unable to sleep, I began seriously considering whether I might actually be experiencing cognitive decline. The consistent concerns from my son and daughter-in-law, coupled with a neurologist's diagnosis, made me doubt my own perception of reality. Perhaps I was in denial about my condition. It's a terrifying thing to question your own mind, to wonder if your certainty is merely a symptom of your deterioration. I decided to keep a detailed private journal, recording my daily activities and thoughts as objectively as possible, to look for patterns or genuine signs of confusion. I hid this journal in my workshop, a place Ashley rarely entered. The turning point came unexpectedly. One afternoon, I was babysitting the twins while Mark and Ashley attended a fundraiser. Emma, my 12-year-old granddaughter, asked if she could use my laptop to finish a school project since she had forgotten her tablet. While helping her log in, I noticed a folder on my desktop labeled Dad's Condition Documentation. I didn't recognize creating such a folder. Curious and increasingly suspicious, I opened it after Emma moved to the kitchen table with the laptop. Inside were dozens of audio files, video recordings, and text documents spanning the previous 18 months. As I began examining the contents, I felt a cold dread spreading through me. There were recordings of conversations with me, but many had clearly been edited to remove context or create the appearance of confusion. One video showed Ashley asking me about a conversation we'd supposedly had the previous day, a conversation that had never occurred, and my understandable confusion was presented as evidence of memory loss. Most disturbing were the text files containing what appeared to be a detailed strategy. One document titled Asset Transfer Plan outlined steps for gradually taking control of my finances and company shares once the power of attorney was secured. Another document listed nursing homes within a 2-hour drive, with notes on cost, quality, and most chillingly, distance from potential visitors, with greater distances apparently preferred. A third file contained a script for Ashley to use when discussing my condition with family, friends, and business associates, designed to establish a public narrative of my declining capacity. But the most shocking discovery was a series of emails between Ashley and a man named Jonathan Hayes, with whom she was clearly having an affair. Their correspondence revealed that Jonathan was a corporate acquisition specialist with Meridian Capital, a private equity firm known for buying family businesses, stripping their assets, and reselling them. Their plan, developed over many months, was breathtakingly cynical. Ashley would help Jonathan acquire Thompson Manufacturing at below market value once Mark had control through the power of attorney. In exchange, Jonathan would ensure Ashley received a substantial consultant fee and promised to leave the marriage and start a new life with her once the deal was complete. "Mark is so easy to manipulate," she wrote in one email. "He truly believes his father is declining. Once we have control of the company and the old man is tucked away in a facility, we can move forward with our plans." I was methodically copying these files to a USB drive when I heard Ashley's voice behind me. "Rich, what are you doing?" She had returned early from the fundraiser. Her expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she realized which folder was open on my screen. "These are private medical documents," she said quickly, reaching for the laptop. "You're getting confused again." "Let me help you." "I'm not confused, Ashley," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm seeing clearly for the first time in months. Where's Mark?" "He dropped me off and went back to the event," she said, her composure quickly returning. "Rich, I know this must be overwhelming for you. Why don't I make you some tea and we can talk about your concerns?" As she spoke, she slowly reached for my phone on the desk beside me. I realized immediately what she intended, to prevent me from contacting Mark or anyone else. I picked up the phone before she could reach it. "I think I'll call Mark myself," I said, "and perhaps Dr. Martin as well. I'd like his opinion on these interesting documents you've been keeping." Ashley's facade cracked briefly, panic flashing across her face before she controlled it. "Mark won't believe you," she said, her voice hardening. "No one will. We have 18 months of documented cognitive decline and a neurologist's diagnosis. If you fight this, you'll only make things worse for yourself." Her threat was explicit, but it confirmed what I had suspected. I was being systematically undermined by my daughter-in-law, with my son either complicit or manipulated into believing I was ill. I needed to act carefully but decisively. "Maybe you're right," I conceded, feigning resignation. "I think I'll lie down for a bit. This is a lot to process." Ashley relaxed visibly, believing she had regained control of the situation. "That's a good idea. Rest will help. We can talk more when Mark gets home." Once in my bedroom with the door locked, I called Sarah in Seattle. As a physician, she would understand the medical aspects, and as my daughter, I trusted her completely. I briefly explained the situation and asked her to come to Cleveland as soon as possible without alerting Mark or Ashley. To her credit, Sarah didn't question my sanity or suggest I might be paranoid. "I'll be on the first flight tomorrow morning," she promised. "Don't confront them further until I arrive." Next, I called my attorney, Harold Winters, who had been my legal advisor and friend for 30 years. Despite the late hour, he answered and listened gravely to my situation. "This is elder abuse, Rich," he said bluntly, "and potentially criminal. Don't sign anything, don't agree to any medical treatments, and secure those files somewhere safe. I'll be at your house first thing tomorrow." Finally, I called Robert Sims, whose judicial experience and connections might prove valuable. He immediately grasped the seriousness of the situation. "I'm calling Detective Catherine Malone," he said. "She specializes in elder crime cases with the Cleveland PD. This goes beyond civil matters if Ashley's been drugging you and falsifying medical information." The night was long and tense. I pretended to take the evening medication Ashley brought me but disposed of it instead, needing to remain clear-headed. I hid the USB drive containing the copied files in a hollowed-out book in my bedroom, a hiding place Elizabeth and I had used for emergency cash. In the morning, I made excuses to decline a breakfast invitation from Ashley, saying I needed time alone to accept my condition. This seemed to please her, as she likely interpreted it as resignation to her plan. Sarah arrived by noon, having taken the first available flight. The moment she walked into my house and embraced me, I felt a wave of relief. Here was someone I could trust completely. Harold arrived shortly after, and Detective Malone joined us by mid-afternoon. We spent several hours reviewing the evidence I had discovered. Sarah was incandescent with anger as she listened to the edited recordings and read through Ashley's detailed plans. "This is calculated and predatory," she said, her medical training evident in her precise assessment. "As a doctor, I can tell you there's nothing wrong with your cognition, Dad, and I'm having you thoroughly evaluated by a specialist I trust as soon as possible." Detective Malone was particularly interested in the evidence of Ashley administering medication without my knowledge. "We can test your hair for traces of these sedatives," she explained. "If we find evidence that matches the pills in your organizer, that's assault and unlawful administration of a controlled substance. We'll need to move carefully, though we want solid evidence before making any accusations." Harold was equally disturbed by the legal implications. "The attempt to secure power of attorney under false pretenses is fraud," he explained. "And the evidence of Ashley's affair and conspiracy with this Jonathan Hayes to defraud the company adds another layer of criminal liability. We devised a plan. First, Sarah would arrange for me to be evaluated by Dr. Elaine Chen, a renowned neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic who specialized in dementia diagnoses. Second, Harold would prepare legal documents protecting my assets and business interests from any potential maneuvers by Mark or Ashley. Third, Detective Malone would quietly investigate Jonathan Hayes and his connection to Ashley, building a case for potential criminal charges. And finally, we would need to confront Mark with the evidence, ideally separating him from Ashley's influence long enough to make him question her narrative. As we were finalizing our plans, an unexpected complication arose. Emma and Ethan returned home from school early, accompanied by Mark. Ashley had apparently called him with concerns about my increasingly erratic behavior, claiming I was having some kind of breakdown. Seeing Sarah's car in the driveway had heightened her suspicions. We quickly adjusted, with Detective Malone discreetly moving to the back of the house while Sarah went to greet her brother. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Mark asked, clearly surprised. "Dad didn't mention you were visiting." "It was a last-minute decision," Sarah said smoothly. "One of my patients had to cancel their appointment at a conference here in Cleveland, so I had an unexpected opening in my schedule. I thought I'd surprise Dad." While Sarah distracted Mark and the twins in the kitchen, Harold and I quickly secured the evidence and briefed Detective Malone on the new development. "I'll continue my investigation quietly," she assured us. Get the neurological evaluation as soon as possible. That will be crucial evidence if this goes to court. The neurological evaluation was scheduled for the following day. Dr. Chen conducted an extensive battery of tests, including cognitive assessments, blood work, and brain imaging. Sarah stayed with me throughout the process, her medical expertise ensuring that every appropriate test was performed. Mark had been told I was having a comprehensive physical at Sarah's suggestion, and surprisingly, he supported the idea, though Ashley argued it was unnecessary given Dr. Kaplan's recent diagnosis. 3 days later, we received Dr. Chen's comprehensive report. I showed no signs of Alzheimer's disease, dementia, or any significant cognitive impairment. My cognitive function was, in her words, exceptional for a man of 69 years, or indeed any age. Additionally, toxicology tests confirmed the presence of lorazepam and other sedatives in my system that weren't prescribed to me, supporting the theory that Ashley had been medicating me without my knowledge. Meanwhile, Detective Malone's investigation into Jonathan Hayes revealed a disturbing pattern. He had been involved in at least 2 previous cases where family businesses were acquired under suspicious circumstances after elderly owners were deemed incompetent. In one case, charges had been filed but later dropped when the primary witness, the elderly business owner, died before trial. The detective also discovered that Ashley had known Jonathan long before her marriage to Mark. They had briefly dated in college, reconnecting about 2 years ago at a pharmaceutical industry conference. Armed with this medical evidence and the results of the investigation, Harold prepared a detailed brief outlining the potential legal consequences of Ashley's actions, including fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted financial exploitation of an elder, and possibly practicing medicine without a license by administering sedatives without consent. The most challenging step remained: confronting Mark. Sarah suggested we meet him at the office rather than at his home, removing him from Ashley's immediate influence and placing him in an environment where my competence had been demonstrated for decades. We asked him to meet us for what we described as an important discussion about succession planning for the company, a topic important enough that he wouldn't bring Ashley along. When Mark arrived at my office and found both Sarah and Harold there with me, his expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "What's going on?" he asked. "Why is Sarah here from Seattle, and why do we need a lawyer for succession planning?" "Please sit down, son," I said gently. "We need to have a difficult conversation about your wife and what she's been doing." For the next hour, we methodically presented the evidence. The folder of manipulated recordings, the documents outlining Ashley's plans for my assets, Dr. Chen's clear medical evaluation contrasted with Dr. Kaplan's questionable diagnosis. We showed Mark how Ashley had been systematically creating false evidence of cognitive decline, including her notes on which medications caused the most noticeable confusion when slipped into my regular pills. The most difficult part was revealing Ashley's affair with Jonathan Hayes and their plans to acquire and strip the company once I was out of the way. Throughout our presentation, Mark's expressions ranged from disbelief to horror to grief. He asked questions, challenged certain points, and twice left the room to compose himself before returning. When we had finished, he sat in silence for several minutes, staring at his hands. "I don't want to believe this," he finally said, his voice hoarse. "But I can't deny the evidence either. Some things never felt right, but Ashley always had an explanation that made sense. She said her aunt had Alzheimer's and she recognized the signs." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears. "Dad, if this is true, I've failed you completely. I should have seen through this." The pain in his voice broke my heart. Whatever his role in this situation, whether willfully ignorant or skillfully manipulated, he was still my son. "You were deceived by someone you trusted," I said. The question now is what we do going forward. What followed was the most difficult period of our family's history. Mark initially returned home to confront Ashley, who denied everything and accused Sarah and me of manipulating him against her. When he presented the evidence we had discovered, she claimed it was being misinterpreted, that she had been documenting my decline out of concern, not malice, and that the asset transfer plans were merely contingency preparations recommended by their financial advisor. Her denials crumbled when Mark revealed we had contacted Dr. Kaplan, who admitted under threat of medical board review that Ashley had provided him with selected videos and reports of symptoms before my appointment, essentially priming him for the diagnosis she wanted. The final blow came when Detective Malone arrived with a search warrant for their home, discovering additional evidence including the sedatives Ashley had been administering to me and a burner phone she used to communicate with Jonathan Hayes. Within a week, Mark asked Ashley to move out of their home. He filed for divorce shortly after, citing fraud and deception as grounds. The court granted him temporary full custody of the twins while investigating Ashley's fitness as a parent. The situation grew even more complex when Jonathan Hayes was arrested attempting to leave the country. Under questioning, he revealed that Ashley's scheme went beyond what we had discovered. They had already approached potential buyers for Thompson Manufacturing, presenting forged documents suggesting I had agreed to sell. 2 companies had expressed interest, and Hayes had been negotiating terms that would have stripped the company's assets while leaving its pension obligations underfunded, potentially devastating the retirement plans of dozens of loyal employees. The legal consequences for Ashley were significant. The district attorney pursued charges of elder exploitation, fraud, conspiracy, and unlawful administration of controlled substances. After initially maintaining her innocence, she eventually accepted a plea deal that included 18 months in prison, 3 years of probation, community service, and mandatory psychiatric evaluation. She was required to pay restitution for medical expenses and legal fees incurred as a result of her actions. Jonathan Hayes received a harsher sentence, 5 years for his role in the conspiracy and his previous similar activities, which prosecutors were now reinvestigating. Perhaps most painful for Ashley was the damage to her relationship with her children. Emma and Ethan, at 12, were old enough to understand some of what had happened. They were confused and hurt, struggling to reconcile the mother they loved with the person who had systematically tried to harm their grandfather and deceive their father. Emma, in particular, felt betrayed upon learning that her mother had used her to gain access to my computer. Family therapy became an essential part of our collective healing process. In the aftermath of this ordeal, our family structure underwent significant changes. Mark moved back into the family home with me temporarily, bringing the twins. Having them in the house brought life and energy that had been missing since Elizabeth passed. Sarah extended her stay in Cleveland for several weeks, helping to stabilize the situation before returning to her practice in Seattle. One unexpected development was the role Maria Gonzalez, my housekeeper, played in the aftermath. Her quiet observations of Ashley's manipulations provided additional evidence for the case, and her steady presence helped maintain normalcy for Emma and Ethan during the turbulent transition. Maria's husband Carlos, who had occasionally helped with home maintenance, offered to move into the guest house temporarily to provide added security and male presence for the twins, a gesture that touched me deeply. As for Thompson Manufacturing, we adjusted our succession plan. Mark and I now work as equal partners, with a more gradual transition timeline that acknowledges both my continuing capabilities and the valuable perspective he brings to the business. We implemented new corporate governance structures to ensure no single person could take control, without appropriate oversight. Victor Martinez, our head of engineering who had first alerted me to Ashley's meetings with potential buyers, was promoted to Chief Technology Officer and given a small ownership stake in recognition of his loyalty. The company has thrived under this collaborative leadership, expanding into new markets and growing to 78 employees. One unexpected outcome was the strengthening of my relationship with my grandchildren. Emma and Ethan, shaken by their mother's actions and their parents' subsequent divorce, found stability in their relationship with me. Our bond deepened as I helped them process their confusion and grief, sharing wisdom from my own experiences with betrayal and recovery. Ethan, who had first voiced doubts about Ashley's claims regarding my condition, developed a particular interest in the manufacturing business, spending hours in the workshop learning machining techniques. Emma, more artistically inclined, found comfort in helping me organize Elizabeth's photography collection, creating a beautiful memorial album that helped us all reconnect with happier memories. 2 years have passed since I discovered Ashley's scheme. Ashley was released from prison after serving 14 months of her 18-month sentence and now lives in Chicago, where she works in pharmaceutical sales again, though at a much lower level than before. She has supervised visitation with the twins twice monthly, and while these visits were initially strained, a skillful family therapist has helped them establish a new, more honest relationship. Mark has primary custody and has shown remarkable strength in helping his children navigate their complex feelings about their mother. The legal proceedings are complete, the divorce is finalized, and we've established a new family equilibrium. Mark recently began dating again, cautiously and with much greater awareness of potential red flags. Caroline Davis, a widow he met through a grief support group, has slowly been integrated into our family gatherings. She's warm, unpretentious, and genuinely fond of the twins, taking care to respect their feelings and boundaries. Sarah and her family visit more frequently than before, our bond strengthened by the crisis we weathered together. She has become an advocate for better recognition of elder abuse in medical settings, giving presentations at medical conferences about the warning signs she missed in my case. Robert Sims, whose initial concern had helped uncover the truth, remains a close friend and valued advisor. He and my other poker buddies have become even more protective, jokingly calling themselves my security detail when we go out together. Maria and Carlos Gonzalez have become like family, with Maria insisting on hosting regular Sunday dinners that bring together our extended family and close friends. These gatherings, filled with laughter and honest conversation, have become a healing ritual that reminds us all of the genuine bonds that survived this difficult chapter. As for me, at 71, I remain active in the business and community. The experience has left its mark. I'm more cautious about who I trust and more deliberate about documenting my wishes and instructions. But it has also reinforced the importance of family bonds that are based on genuine love and respect, rather than financial interest. I've established a foundation focusing on elder protection and education about financial exploitation, turning this painful chapter into something that might help others avoid similar situations. Looking back, I recognize several warning signs that I missed or dismissed. Ashley's increasing control over my medication and medical appointments, the way she spoke about me to others in my presence, as if I couldn't understand, the gradual isolation from friends and certain family members, the inconsistencies in her stories about my supposed memory lapses. My advice to others, especially aging parents with significant assets, is to maintain relationships with multiple people you trust completely. Create checks and balances in your financial and medical care. Document your wishes clearly while you're unquestionably competent, And perhaps most importantly, trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. The hardest lesson from this experience was recognizing that sometimes those who claim to be caring for you may have motives far different from what they profess. But the most valuable lesson was discovering the resilience of true family bonds. How Mark found the courage to face an unbearable truth. How Sarah dropped everything to come to my aid. And how even the twins, young as they were, demonstrated remarkable strength in processing their mother's betrayal. We are still healing, still rebuilding trust and establishing new patterns. But we are doing it together with clear eyes and honest hearts. And in that, despite everything we've been through, I consider myself fortunate beyond measure. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.